All right, welcome, welcome. Usually like to wait just a minute just in case we have more people coming into the webinar. All right, so welcome to Docubee and Paralegal Voice's webinar, Reimagining the New Year, How to Better Navigate Legal Changes in 2024. We have a very exciting discussion ahead of us. We have Mark Hansen here from the Docubee team, who is our product manager here at Docubee, to talk about legal tech and everything that's up and coming. We also have Jill Francisco is a senior paralegal, a co-host of the Paralegal Voice Podcast from the Legal Talk Network. And we also have Tony Sipp, who is a paralegal manager, also co-host of the Paralegal Voice Podcast with the Legal Talk Network. Welcome, guys. Thank you for spending time with us here today to go over all of the things that are happening in this new year and how our audience can really take your years of experience all together and move forward with confidence into 2024. How are you doing?
Just fine. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to really start off with is just really emphasize what it is that we're talking about, what the issues are that a lot of professionals in the legal field, specifically paralegals, run into. I know that there were a ton of new laws that got enacted at the beginning of the year, and there's nobody better to start that conversation off than Tony and Jill. Can you let us know a little bit about what the struggle is that you guys see when we have all of these changes kind of pouring in?
Guess I can start off. First, recognizing that there are new laws. A lot of people don't realize that the laws from last year, or that were voted in from last year, are now implemented on the 1st. Some are taking longer. Some may be June, April, but there's new laws. For example, there are new and revised judicial council forms, and that is something that's important that we as paralegals need to make sure that we're aware of, and that we're not recycling old ones from 2023 and using the ones from 2024 moving forward. So hopefully the automated process in our office has that, and they automatically update. And but if they don't, you're aware of it, and that you know what to do and what forms to use, or the revised forms to use.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that if you're not up to date on these things, that could really end bad on your end if you're kind of just grandfathering in your old processes from last year. Absolutely. And so when where do you usually go to figure out these changes, and what is that usually like? Is there a lot of hullabaloo around it? What are usually the biggest issues that paralegals really run into when these laws are changing? Does it add a lot to the workload?
No, I would say that the law is fluid, and because of that, you have to, if you're a good paralegal, you have to make sure that you're staying up to date with all of the new changes in the law and the legal system, the Supreme Court's decisions. For example, out here, we have, in California, that is, we have, and I think that might be federal actually too, the paid sick leave, instead of it being 3 days, it's now 5 days. And I've already found out that people know that because they've been calling it. So, yeah, so it's not a burden. It's if you stay up to date, or if your manager stays up to date, or your whoever your administrator is up to date, it shouldn't be too bad on you. Plus, if you have systems in place that make the process easier, so you don't have to think about it, like you just go to the form and you can fill it out. Like I saw something on Docubee that really organized everything, all your cases, which is really great, because now you know that those forms are going to be automatically updated if necessary, or if you have to update some of your other things that have, I don't know, from last year and into this year. We want to make sure that we stay consistent, we stay up to date, and that we are doing our best to represent the client.
And is this specifically in like the client services, right? So this would be anybody in your database that you're already working with, that you're facing with, right? So
Yeah.
would you say it's mostly an issue from that end, or is it more kind of like an internal shuffling that happens?
That's what I was going to comment on, Tony, just real quick. What Tony was talking about, I think a lot of times, especially when you work for a larger law firm and, they have procedures in place and like using services like Docubee or, whatever they, like I said, whatever they have chosen to keep themselves up to date and make sure they're in compliance. And then it, of course, trickles down. And you have to obviously, as a paralegal, you have to kind of be aware that, like it's like, hey, I thought, like when you're looking at something, make sure that, something wasn't missed. So if you think it should have been updated and it wasn't, obviously inquire. But funny, but probably not funny, one of the biggest paralegal battles is obviously implementing it and telling the attorneys or the certain, management or whatever that you're working with, hey, this is new. We have to go to this new process. We have to do this now. We have to fill out this form different. And, I don't know if anybody likes change. I mean, I personally don't mind it. Keeps it interesting, keeps it exciting. But I think Tony will agree with me, a lot of attorneys, I think that's one of the big paralegal and other support staff roles that we play is, trying to convince and make the changes and the updates and things like that go smoother and just kind of glide right in. And maybe if there's additional work on the background, we do that in preparation of going to the attorney and saying, hey, we know this is new form out there. It wanted this new information, so I went ahead and collected that, that type of things. And I think that it just increases the value of obviously the paralegal's role and all that and keeping update on things.
That sort of mirrors what we see on our side too. We during the beginning of the year in particular, we'll see a lot of updates to forms and intake and things like that to start capturing new data points. It's just something that it seems like every year rolls around and here's a whole bunch of changes we need to go ahead and develop, and it's sort of a theme. So it's interesting to hear that paralleled with you guys.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. Can you guys, so for the year in 2024 or even in past years, what kinds of things have you seen just as examples that maybe some tips and tricks that you've used or that you have, as an experienced paralegals that you can give maybe somebody who's much newer to the industry about this time of year? Is it really trying to anticipate the needs of the rest of the office and making sure that you have these changes in place to bring to the lawyers or the partners of whatever firm you're working for? Or have you ever come into any snags yourself that have really been a headache for you?
Tony, I'll let you go because
I was gonna say you go. I think it's important because the paralegal role has expanded beyond just legal research and drafting. So today's paralegals have to utilize technology and make themselves more efficient and valuable. Tools like what Docubee has allows for that to happen more efficiently. Everybody's worried about AI, but automation is going to happen. And it's actually better for your job, and it costs the client less and the firm less to use automated systems. So, rolling into this year was a matter of educating up. You are the first ones mostly to see the forms that are going to be implemented or already have been implemented, but you need to make sure that, because I'm a manager, I let everybody know. My whole team, the whole management team, the ones in charge of the secretaries, they need to know, because we are the ones that are doing the filings. We are the ones that are making sure that we're up to date with the new laws. Some attorneys may not know that or may know that, but ultimately we end up being the ones that are filling out and filing the forms. So is it a burden? A little bit, just the education part of it. But beyond that, it's pretty easy. I mean, I've been doing it for a few years now, and I follow the Senate bills and Assembly bills, so I can anticipate what's going to come out or what's going to be effective as of the 1st. And if you follow that, good leaders do that anyway. It's not too difficult. It's just making sure that the rest of the people you work with know it and are aware of it.
Yeah, and to follow up with Tony, I mean, I think from my perspective too, is aside from obviously getting the forms and being, abreast and knowing things change, I think a big thing that we always deal with, and also working with attorneys, and Tony and I talked about technology, how it's always changing. And that's one thing when you use platforms and companies like Docubee, they obviously have done their research and they're out there and they know what's current. And like, for instance, I mean, I think it's a big to do now about all this, like the digital signatures, on whatever it may be, contracts, releases, whatever you're trying to do, is it the proper way? Are you doing it the proper way? And then also we've been running into, if it's something needs notarized, that's a big thing. Do you do the, I'm a notary, but not, I was just a regular notary. If somebody calls me, I go down their office and stamp it, that type of thing. And I think that's what technology is always changing with, a new form comes out, but there's something else about it, that technology ties in, because it's always changing. It's always being updated. And, sometimes, you can think you signed something or initialed something or checked a box, and it's not what you needed to do. And then obviously that's going to mess up your submission and obviously, trickle down to issues possibly for your clients. So, I think that's one thing that outside sources can help you with, the technology part of it, keeping up on it, because obviously I'm not looking at that part. I'm looking maybe at the part, the more factual specifics to what I'm dealing with and working with the attorneys, and not necessarily the technology that's out there to keep me in compliance with new laws and forms and things that are coming out.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can really help with, and we run into the same thing, right? Like you mentioned e-sign. Like we've specialized in that. We really have a good understanding. But when it comes to something like maybe knowledge-based authentication or like notary, like you mentioned, we'd much rather partner with an expert in that realm than us try to figure all that out and kind of roll that out as a product feature. So we can provide that as an option, but it's not our specialty, like say e-sign or workflow or something like that. And it's funny to hear the parallels, just being on the technology side of things. We face some of the same issues. AI, I think, is one you mentioned. I was listening to your last podcast actually, and you guys were talking about AI, and it's the same thing we had, right? I think you mentioned, Jill, that your org decided, don't write these things with AI, right? Don't write these documents. Like that had to be said for some reason, but yeah, we had to put it out there. But from our side, it was kind of an interesting take. Our teams, we actually embraced it and said, if our engineers want to use AI to help look at a piece of code and see if they can make it better or discover a problem, we'd rather them become better engineers using a tool than not use it and fall behind. And so what we found the net result of that was they don't really use it a whole bunch. They'll use it here and there, but it's not like they're just using that as their sole day-to-day way of doing AI or coding rather. So I think it's interesting in this realm too, like when we talk about like legal and documents and trying to process those things, what people think might be AI might not be what we really need to do. For instance, yeah, we can generate documents using AI, and that's a nifty feature, or maybe a portion of a document can be rewritten. Those are all well-known things, but we can route documents based on an analysis of the document, for instance. So we could say, if this document, as an example, was over $50,000, I want this to go to this person for approval. That's a very basic use case, but that's an AI capability that really does streamline a lot of things for businesses where you can ask questions of documents and then have it go to different people. But it's not like taking over people's job. It's just making your organization more efficient and getting it to the right people quicker. So it's interesting to see those parallels, sort of how we handle it from the technology side and how you guys handle it from the legal side.
Yep, it is. It's sometimes overlapping and, like you said, sometimes totally different approach. But still, like you said, working together, I think you come out with the best solutions.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so when you guys are evaluating tech or the tech that you guys have in place now, what are the most important things that you guys really look for when you're trying to face these challenges or implement these changes?
Cybersecurity.
Mm.
It starts there. Like the IT won't install it unless they know for sure that it's not going to cause a problem. Not that that's an absolute, because there's a reason why it's called cybersecurity and that people have hackers. But that's one of the first things that they're looking at. Past that, once we get over that hurdle, the flow, does it work with the other tools that we have in the office already? If there are improvements, what are they? And how are they being implemented? And would it be beneficial to the firm? So we look at a lot, the workflow, making sure it's efficient in time management. I mean, it's one of the cornerstones of being a paralegal is to make sure that everything is efficient. You use your time blocks, and you make sure that you are staying on top of the technology in the office and outside of the office. We collaborate here with the IT department. We have a trainer as well, and we try to find the best solution for everyone. Ease of use. There's people that are, in theory, know how things should work, and then there's the people that are doing hands-on on what does work. It makes a difference in the workflow because, like, for example, when legal solutions stop becoming legal solutions, you had to find an alternative tool. And everybody found their own tool that works for their firms. But it's important to stay abreast on what's going on in the technology field. And plus, when your contracts are up, it's time to move forward with a new vendor, for example. So yeah, just make sure you're abreast on the new technology and what's coming up, what's out there, and present it to your management, present it to your supervisor, whoever, because that might be something that makes sense for the firm.
That's what I was just going to say. In my perspective, I mean, obviously, I'm not the paralegal manager, and I'm not making decisions on what companies or directions that the firm would be looking, because we're a nationwide firm, to adapt or to use. But I think it's part of the paralegal's role, and I think it's a tip for new or seasoned paralegals, that if the firm that you work for implements something, like Tony said, it's handed down, it's I've installed all at one place, and you're just kind of given like, hey, we're going to use this, and you're the training on it or whatever. If it's not working, or it's not performing, or it's not doing something, or it's not making you efficient, or as you used to be, or whatever the, or accuracy, or whatever if there's something that's an issue with it, I think it's the duty of the paralegal to bring that to attention, like Tony was just saying at the end there. Because otherwise, how do they know? How do they know it's working? And it's not that it's like, okay, we're going to get rid of this thing. It's like maybe things can be tweaked and changed and adapted to be more, to allow the law firms, paralegals, using whatever program that you've chosen to use and process to be more efficient. So I think that I'm saying, like Tony said, stay abreast, but also I think it's great to give feedback. And I guess positive also, not just negative. It's great. I always try to be a proponent of you're going to hear it if it's bad, but I always try to say you're going to hear it if it's good too, because obviously that's important. If it's working really well and it's really making a difference in your practice and your usual tasks, then I think they want to know that also.
Yeah, as a
I agree.
product manager, please, please send me the feedback. Like, if you ever want something fixed in a product, I'll give you a little hint. Find the product manager of the company and go to them, because they'll be the ones that get it fixed for you. They're always the ones that are most concerned about the feedback.
I actually was going to say that Mark would be a great person to collaborate with. You want to do that, and I've done it before. Saying this isn't working. We want this to happen, but it's not happening. Can you help? And 99% of the time they do. If they can, they do. But it's you got to work with the vendors. You got to make sure that they're on board with what the firm's mission is and what your mission is, and what we need from you, so that we can best provide for the firm, for our clients, for the team that is supporting all of the attorneys. So it makes a difference. To choosing the right vendor makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think that's what we've learned. When we work with potential customers, we need an advocate within the organization to really kind of pull us through and help us kind of, like you said, get distributed within an organization. It's not easy. There's always pushback, right? There's people who like doing it the way they've done it for the last how many ever years, and that's understand. I mean, I'm a victim to it too. Whenever Chrome changes something from Google, I'm upset because it looks like a pixel different, right? I get it. So we need you guys, as advocates, to help us kind of, with our side of things, to help, help support you as an organization, but also to make you guys look good, right? You've kind of put your neck out in line in a way to kind of bring us in and take up a part of your business and make things easier. So yeah, we understand that that's a crucial part of it, is to make sure that you guys are happy, and that you feel like you're being heard, and the product's evolving to meet the needs that you have.
Very
Yes.
true. And Mark, since you're, the product manager, you have a working knowledge of basically all the technologies in the space that are helpful. What is it that, the people like Docubee and other companies have really done to try to make it easier to implement in existing systems, right? So you don't want to introduce a new technology and it's like pulling teeth and become, like you said earlier, Tony, when a legal solution no longer becomes a legal solution,
Yes.
that's
Well
a
said.
big issue. So what is it that you've seen in the industry, Mark, that's kind of trying to alleviate that, to the growing pains and the changes that need to take place to implement something like Docubee?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's around integrations, right? Like, every company has loads of different solutions they've brought in, and I think the expectation at this point is that it will communicate between the different things, whether it's your customer management solution or your billing solution, any of those things, even your e-sign, all the way into your contracts. Like, there's an expectation that those things will communicate at least at some level to keep everything coherent. There's usually a source of truth, that people in the business want to refer to, and all that needs to work together. So from a technology, like, just at a high level view, like, that's important. So whether it's an API, or some other tool that kind of syncs that data, that's really important. I think making sure that, the solutions are solving people's problems, is an important one, right? Like, as an example, we talk about a lot is like intake. Loads of different organizations have intake for their potential clients, but what we learned is, like, no one does intake the same way, right? So there's no one size fits all. So there's loads of solutions that handle it in different ways. Some solutions are sort of like, hey, here's the path that we think is the best path, and you sort of you conform to how we do things. We have a slightly different take in that we can build a solution that kind of puts you on your own path. So if your intake needs to notify this person, or it needs to loop back if this happens, or any number of things in a pattern, we can build that specific to a business. So that's just our take on it, as opposed to some of our competitors. So I think those are important too, making sure that your solution sort of fits your company. And that's why we do it the way we do. We believe that, helping build our solution to come in line with how you do business makes a lot more sense just from our perspective. So that's the avenue we've went down. I think that the third thing is we've really kind of focused on making it easy to transition from one tool to another. So when we look at our interface, or we look at how we sort of do our processes, we try to simplify them down as much as possible. We try to remove extra bells and whistles, and maybe don't put them out in front, so that there's a checkbox or an option that doesn't necessarily get used maybe it gets used once in 100 times. That's not in your face every time you're just trying to get something signed, as an example. Or something as simple as like we have an in product editor. It looks just and acts just like Word. So when you have maybe a more traditional legal professional who's just used to working Word, Word's still very prevalent in the industry. It's not as hard a transition if they need to come in to use this new tool, because it meets the expectation or how they work today. That makes sense. So those are some of the top ones I think that come to mind when we talk about that idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that there is a lot, like you were talking about bells and whistles. There is a lot of new stuff that's coming out. The industry is changing and adapting a lot. Can you talk about some of the new features and things that have come out recently or are on the horizon? And Jill and Tony, I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the new things that you guys are excited for. I know that you guys were talking about AI and one of your latest podcasts, but I think there's a lot more to it as well.
Yeah, I can talk just to like at a high level what we're looking at least as an organization. AI is one of them, but we've talked to, as we talk to legal professionals and legal firms, their take on it is very much what Jill said. Like, it's interesting, it can solve some problems, but like let's be measured about it. Let's just not jump off the deep end and just start doing all these things without really kind of any oversight or really understanding of, are we doing the right thing? So I think that's an appropriate response. I think that's how most companies just in general are handling it. Let's see where it can help us, but like let's not open ourselves up to problems down the road. I think the other big one that people are interested in seeing, at least as we talk to people, is a better understanding of how to get a hold of documents, how to find documents, how to search, whether that's just a traditional search where you can say, give me everybody, or search for a name or search for an email. But we're looking at more, I guess, AI-based ideas where we could say, show me all the contracts that are expiring in the next 30 days with a value of over $100,000, or show me all the legal contracts I have with this particular clause in it. Those are very specific use cases, but making it to where like any question like that could really be brought to our solution, and it could get you the data you need in a quick, timely manner. Those are the two I think that really kind of stand out, at least in terms of like the AI space.
Very good. And Jill and Tony, you guys using any AI in your daily practice? Just curious.
I would say we're not using it yet on a daily basis, but like I said, we hear stuff. I'd say probably at least probably 2 or 3 times a month where we're more on, because legal, obviously, we're, the ethical component to all the AI concerns and everything. I think that we're definitely keeping abreast on what's going on out there, and then they disseminate that information to us. And like, personally, like we had like I said, we talked about on our podcast. I'm sure Tony has, just like I have. I attended a national little CLE that they had on it, and also we did one locally, because it's like I'm in West Virginia, Tony's in California. That's a big difference, East Coast, West Coast, and things are, obviously things are happening nationally, but it's also important to keep kind of what's happening locally and what people think and how your little area, and because your geographics is treating the things that are coming out new, and because people always deal with them and react differently. But I think more it's just of us sitting back and seeing what's going on, what's going to transpire, what's actually going to happen. But definitely there's so many discussions on the ethics, I think, is where me personally that we talk about a lot, because ethics is also continuing, ongoing, just like technology, always changing. And so I think that's what we have to implement on a daily basis, because you forget sometimes that ethical is not just, ethics concerns are not just in person or on the phone. It's technology, it's your emails, it's using things like AI and things that are out there. So I think that's what right now that is more of a usual or a continual occurrence in my tasks over here as I see it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I know that, Tony, earlier you were talking about, first of all, making the case to changing technologies or bringing something in is one, and then data being a huge thing that you look for when you're looking at technology and what you want to implement. So it would be interesting to hear, Mark, from your point of view, what are the things that, just as an advice piece that you would say should be looked at when evaluating new tech? What are the things that are have to haves and nice to haves to be able to make that case to changing to something different?
Yeah, I think that, both Joe and Tony mentioned like compliance is a big one, right? It's one of the first questions we'll get in a phone call. What compliances do you have? So that's an important one. So whether it's HIPAA compliance or SOX compliance or whatever measure you kind of deem is the, I guess, the watermark for your company, like make sure you have that. So we have both those. Generally that covers the vast majority of our customers, but once in a while we'll get a question, hey, do you support the specific types of compliance? And so I think that's an important one to make sure that the compliance level that your company's at matches the vendor you're going to go with. So that's important. The other considerations I think that you need to think about are the integration points, making sure that whatever solutions you have today are going to work with the solution you're picking out, or at least you're comfortable with the amount of data you can move between the two. It may be you're perfectly happy with a solution not communicating at all, and that's fine. It's very specific to your use case. So I think that's important, though. If you do have an expectation of data transfer, to make sure you cover that when you're meeting with the vendor you're looking at, because that's going to be something that will not get better generally over time. Those are usually harder integrations once you're up and running, and it's hard to kind of go back and kind of put that back in the box once it's out. And I think just understanding if it really solves your problem. I think the big question we try to answer for our customers is like, what's the ROI? Like, if I invest in this, like, how does this? What's the cost savings? What's this doing for my organization? Is it taking time from my paralegals to work on other things that we're currently shorthanded on? Is it taking a process that's expensive by using a different vendor and now streamlining that because I can use this new tool to do two things instead of just the one, and I can combine them and save costs there. So I think that's another thing, and that's something we try to do from our sales side, is to try to help present a case to your organization of like, what's the return on investment for this? Why are we spending this money? What do we get out of it? And how does that make us how does that make us better in the future? Whether it's just security is an ROI, right? Having a centralized place for your documents, that's a return on investment. There's lots of organizations who don't have any of those things, and it just depends sort of what your expectations are and where you're trying to make improvements within your org to help drive that.
Yeah, and going back a little bit to talking about how it works in with other solutions or things that you have in place, making sure you kind of have like that seamless line through all of your tasks that you need to do. Can you talk a little bit about workflow and what that looks like at Docubee and how that can really apply to some of these changes that people and paralegals need to cope with at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I think that workflow sort of means something different to everybody, so I'll give you sort of our definition of it, and that we can sort of route and control a document through an entire process. And that process could be anything from, I need a digital signature on this, I need someone to review this, I need to collaborate on this document with someone else. I need this to get an approval, and I need it to route one way or the other depending on some decision or a piece of data that's already within the workflow. We can collect data as part of the workflow and then inject that into documents, whether it's creating a document from scratch or inserting clauses. So there's a lot of things we can do with the workflow. So anything really you can think of doing in Word in a document, we can do that through our workflow engine, and at the end of it, build a document very specific to what that does. But the real power in it is that as new things change, as laws change, as new requirements from the business come up, we can insert those into that workflow really easily, and it continues to function. And it's just ingesting these new changes, whether it's adjusting the current workflow to do something a little different, or adding another step where maybe you need another output or you need to collect a little bit more data. It lets you kind of iterate and keep moving forward without having to go through and reinvent the wheel every time something new comes through.
Absolutely. And so just thinking of using workflows to address some of these changes and things that need to happen, what usually is kind of like the time consideration that needs to be made when you're picking a new solution or trying to put in some legal tech? What does that usually look like? Is this something that can be implemented quickly? Should it be something that you're placing a lot of time into? Is that change from organization to organization? What is it that you usually see?
Yeah, I think that usually when people come to us, at least initially, there's a sort of a grander idea of what they want to do. But what we found is breaking that into pieces and sort of helping them get incremental like parts of it up and running is a better path. And so we can do that in several ways. We can train people on how to use our platform and educate them on how to build their own workflows and utilize our technology without having to involve us. But we also have a team. So if you want to move a little quicker or you want to accelerate it, we have a team that can help build those workflows through, statements of work and things like that to help get you there quicker. But in general, what we see is usually there's usually a very specific goal people come to us with. Depending on the size of that, we can either cut it into little pieces, or if it's already kind of a small kind of incremental thing, we can do that fairly quickly. So generally, I'll say we'll move faster in the businesses that come to us just because we're pretty quick in that respect. It's usually, I think that, through the discussion earlier, like getting buy-in from the business or the legal organization, as Jill and Tony said, there's usually a lot more kind of approvals and making sure everybody's comfortable with what we're doing. And that's really where the brunt of the time is. So it's going to depend on the organization, how fast they can free up people, how fast they can kind of get buy-in. And again, we can help with that, but there's still sort of the check the box part of that, and that usually is the blocker in terms of when we roll these new things out.
Sure. And Tony and Jill, just from your perspective, is it usually difficult to get people to buy into changing and coming on board with new technology, or is it something that is always moving so quickly that it's just inherent in what you guys do at this point?
I guess I could say that it takes a lot of time to get everybody together, and
That's a nice way to put it.
it's like not my circus, not my monkeys.
I feel like yours is a little more in depth.
Yeah, it's involved, but I mean, the nerd in me comes out when it comes to technology, and I do my research on all of these products that I'm like, oh, the contract is about to expire. What do we need next? What are we using? What haven't we used with the product that we're currently using? And what would flow better with the entire team? So, I mean, for example, we have go back to AI. We realized that some of the vendors that we were working with did not provide all of the solutions that we needed. Then we found another vendor that was using AI, and this is and I'll just give you the example of, let's say it's a parade, and somebody threw a rock. AI can help track that face through the crowd to the next, place, and it's great for litigation because it's like, look, Your Honor, you can see them from here, here. It has geo-tracking, right? So AI helps in that way, but getting everybody to say, look, this is how it's going to benefit all of us, that takes time. Just for any software, really. It's the exploring, finding out possible solutions, then meeting with the vendor, then talking with the vendor, and then trying to have the vendor do a demonstration for the team. And that evaluation and the feedback that comes from that kind of determines which way, if we're going to move forward with a particular vendor or go in a different direction. But yeah, it's Mark's right. It takes some time to get through that process.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I alluded to that earlier, that change, it's on our end, it's sometimes a battle to get it. And I think Tony touched on a really important part, is to research, whether it's like he was talking about research and, contracts are about to expire and, what you should go with, what you should stay with. But I think from my perspective, it's researching and making sure that I know what the changes were. I know what we need to do, and try to make it more of an easier transition and less. I mean, I know this sounds funny, but less time. Like, to me, that seems like when frustration ensues a lot of times with when I'm dealing with attorneys on, whether in-house or other, is when there's a lot of time, that they interpret as due to a change. It's taking up more of their time. It's making stuff, take longer. So it's just a matter of doing that background work, doing that prep work, and so then you're best prepared to try to make the changes as smooth as possible.
I think there must be some mathematical formula that says, like, for every new person added to each meeting, how much longer this process is going to take. Like every time it seems to have, there's like 2 in the first call, and there's 4 in the next call, and then there's 20, and you're like, uh-oh.
Yes, exactly.
What happened?
Yeah, so now it's usually a good sign, but then it usually means, okay, well, that's going to add a lot of time because there's 20 people you now need buy-on on, which is fine. It's just there's got to be a formula in there somewhere to kind of help predict that.
Use some AI. Maybe that'll help.
Maybe, yeah.
Get on working with that. Amazing. Awesome. Well, that kind of segues into a question that we have here. I wanted to leave a couple of minutes for a few questions that we have. The question specifically is, so how would you handle, this is good for Tony and Jill, but also even Mark as well, how would you handle managers or lawyers in the legal space who are resistant to technology and change? I would imagine it means somebody, a legal office where they've used the same processes for X amount of time, and they're not really gung-ho to bring on new technology, and they're not the tech nerds that for instance, you might be, Tony.
that is it's a good question. Usually, like you said, most firms are kind of conservative, and just, I have my preferred vendors. This is what we're going to use. We've always used them, no exceptions. Until you come across a new case that's paying a lot more, and you can get continued business with them. That's when you pull out, and I hate to say it this way, but that's when you pull out the younger attorney who's a little bit tech savvy and say, listen, watch this. Here's a solution that will help everyone. And then they sell it themselves. And then if they bring me in, which they have, I sell it too, because I've seen what it can do. I want it to be a part of our system, because granted, we weren't using it before, but now you can see how this is an added value for the firm, for the client, reducing costs, doing a lot of, like Jill was saying, you want it to be cohesive. You want it to just kind of flow from what you were using before until now. And when you're hands-on, when you're preparing documents, when you're doing the judicial counsel forms, or utilizing some type of new technology or want to, when you're hands-on and the workflow makes sense to you, like adjusting space on the caption so that you can enter more letters if it's a bunch of does or long entity names. It's important to have a document or a vendor that has control that can allow us to expand, reduce, add a box, etc. Those things are important to the secretaries, to the paralegals, to make sure that their job is not harder. They're working smarter, not harder. And if you get the right tool, it's just going to make them more efficient. Like if they go from a pleading and it can update some forms, like with the click of a button, just click, I want this, 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 and this, and it spits it out. Yeah, that's more efficient than what you were doing before. And even though it's new technology, yeah, that's what the vendor comes in and they can show you how to use it. For those who are skeptical or create a video, we can keep it on the drive. That's my preferred method, but that's kind of how it goes.
Absolutely. That kind of comes into the next question. Sometimes I'm a little overwhelmed when looking at new tech. Where do you usually go to research new tech, and do you recommend speaking with a vendor first before deciding?
Legal Week.
Legal Week. All right. Yes.
Every time. I haven't been there recently, but that is, if you want to
We will
find
be there.
all the technology, yeah, that is the like Candyland for everything right there. I should have said Disney World really, but yeah, it's still, it's very, you see 3 floors of just incredible products that people have, and samples. That's the best part too. Having all those samples that they give away. I learned so much with doing those, and I also get our IT director to go as well. So it's a tag team effort to make sure that we're all aware on the technology that's out there and available. And he'll check the security side, I'll check the user friendly side.
That helps
And
buy-in as well if you have more than just one person sort of going in, learning and add.
yes,
Wow.
yeah, I began to learn how to make sure who to invite to the table so that I can make sure that this gets out, and somebody supports my efforts.
Sure. Sounds like a lot of it is knowing your team and having open communication as well from the start to make sure that all of this goes smooth.
Absolutely. I'm a big person on communication. So whoever I can bring in and get on my side in a good way, like not like trying to sell something because this is a friend of mine, but more like this product is really good and this could, one, save us money, and two, help everybody be more efficient. So get the buy-in with the team, the people that need to buy in with you, and then you can sell it to the others. And once everybody's on board, they feel comfortable. It's easier to have that decision made, instead of 3 months going by before something happens.
Absolutely. And I just like to, hear from the other side too. Mark, where would you say is a good place to just start looking at tech? I know that that's something that you do on a day-to-day basis while trying to help improve Docubee and make sure we're helping offices and firms face these challenges. Where's a good place for people to really start?
I think ILTA is a good one, ILTA. It's the International Legal Technology Association. They have a load of resources for people on the technical side of the legal space. Everything from forums to kind of ask questions to conference. They have their own. They'll actually be at Legal Week, but they have their own conference. So I think they're a good resource. You can become a member there as well, and it sort of opens up a lot of opportunity for not only seeing new technology, but being able to ask people either like what their thoughts are on it or how they implemented it. I have a friend of mine who's actually the IT guy at a local legal company, and he said that he's never implemented a piece of technology that he didn't check on there. So that's his take on it. That's sort of how he does it. But I agree. I think it's a great resource for looking and finding new things or asking questions around, you know, what would work for this situation, right? You might not even know what solution you need as an example. They're a great resource to go say, hey, I'm trying to solve X problem. What have you guys used in the past? I think that's a great place to go and get some information.
Very good. Very
I
good.
got the ALA does a great job on that as well, and they have discussion boards, which if you're looking for a product, like Mark was saying, there's so many tools. I keep learning more and more as I reach out more and more, and like my quest for knowledge. I find other organizations, other entities that are doing something that I need to be a part of. And I should have known. I wish I knew earlier. But yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there to find good tech.
Awesome. And one last question here. Do you ever find that you have any issues with client services when implementing new tech? So I'd imagine this would be if you have clients for a long time and you're onboarding a lot of sophisticated technology. Do you ever have any issues or foresee issues in the client facing sort of way?
I don't know if that's for me. I mean, from what we've seen, at least on our side, I think what typically happens is it's usually I guess it's just new, right? So we generally fill gaps in a lot of cases where it just didn't have a pre-existing technology. So going back to the bridging system, that's an important concept for us, being able to kind of fill that gap between, maybe your CRM and some other solution, and I need it to do X, right? That's really, really good at kind of filling gaps. So for us in general, it's not been a really big friction point. And even when we do implementations where we replace pieces of it, we're customizable enough to make it look fairly close or work in a very similar manner to where it's not so jarring. So at least from our side, I think in the past, we've not really seen a lot of friction with it.
Yeah, and I guess this would kind of open up to maybe like a trust thing, right? So I know that Docubee and some other technologies out there can white label things, so it doesn't seem like they're going into platforms that they don't really recognize or aren't sure what they are. Is that really important as well to keep that seamless experience?
Yeah, if that's a concern for people, we certainly support that. Our whole solution is built off of open APIs, so our solution's built off of them, but we can also provide those to other providers or to other organizations that sort of want to they want to stay within their ecosystem, basically. So say you have some solution that's managing some portion of your business, maybe you want to bring in e-signature or some workflow, we can do that in a seamless way where it will look like it's just part of their solution. It doesn't require a separate login. They can manage all that all from their code, and it'll look very, very consistent with their current application. They wouldn't even realize in some cases that it was us under the covers.
All right. Awesome. Well, this has been a really, really great discussion. Really appreciate all of your guys' time here today on our webinar, Reimagining the New Year, How to Better Navigate Legal Changes in 2024. Jill and Tony, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed talking to you guys. If anybody here would like to hear more from Tony and Jill, they have their own podcast, the Paralegal Voice with the Legal Talk Network. They have some really, really great episodes out there. I definitely encourage you guys to go and check that out. And yeah, thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. And Happy New Year.
You as well.
Happy New Year.